Welcome to the wild. In Reclaim, we lead men into the wild to help them encounter the truth about God and themselves. That's actually Reclaim's mission statement. So what's with this idea of the wild? Why the wild? Why does Reclaim see the outdoors as a critical part of their strategy in reaching men? And what if I'm just not that outdoorsy of a guy? Can I still be part of what Reclaim's doing and use this model to reach men? Or is Reclaim a ministry that's really focused on those kinds of guys that like to wear flannel and carry a pocket knife and like to shoot things? Well, this is video number 3 in the first module of the Reclaim Campfire Guide video training series. And in this video, we're going to answer all of these questions and more as we press into the concept of the wild and why it is in Reclaim we leverage wild, rugged, untamed spaces and activities as we work to better come alongside men and walk with them in their spiritual journeys. One thing that we see in the outdoors is that God's wild heart is reflected all throughout creation. From the strength of the tiniest ant to the ferocious great white shark, mountain ranges, the depths of the sea, raging rivers, violent storms. One thing that's certain is that behind all of it is a creator God who has a wild and untamed aspect to his character. It's important for us to realize that every man bears the image of that God, and our wild heart is actually crucial for us being able to fulfill our calling as the ones who protect and provide and pursue, who rule and govern, who explore and discover, who multiply, who sacrifice. See, our wild heart is necessary for us to fulfill our mission as men. The idea of the wild is so much more than just physical wilderness. It's the frontier in a man's life, the uncharted, unexplored places in his heart that many men may not even know exist. And those that do would most likely rather not explore those places. So in Reclaim, within the context of our mission statement, the wild is a place that God calls a man out of his comfort and control and into the deep waters of his own heart and the heart of God. It's a place of spiritual transformation and growth. A verse that ties intimately to this concept in our mission statement is Jeremiah 6:16.
Jeremiah 6:16. This is what the Lord says. Stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient paths. Ask where the good way is and walk in it, and you will find rest for your souls. But you said, we will not walk in it.
Walking in the wilderness of one's own heart is not a place that most men are willing to walk. But the spiritual wild is part of this ancient path that men need to return to with the Father so that they can discover who they are, and more importantly, whose they are, so that they can lay hold of their true identity as sons of the King. Helping men access these forgotten parts of their heart and helping them walk with the Father through spiritual wilderness is key to our mission in guiding men to freedom and life. Oftentimes we get asked, is Reclaim an outdoor ministry? We do a lot in the outdoor space, but I would say I'd be more inclined to describe us as a ministry that has embraced this idea of spiritual wilderness and the idea that there is a wild aspect to the masculine heart. We are not a hunting and fishing ministry or an adventure sports ministry or a trail ministry. But because the physical wilderness so closely parallels the spiritual wilderness, and because the wild aspects of God's character and the wild aspects of the masculine heart so closely parallel the wildness that we see all throughout creation, there are a lot of advantages to leading men, to building relationships with men, and to speaking spiritual truth to men in the context of the outdoors. So for the rest of this video, I want to walk you through a bulleted list of practical reasons that we see for leading men and ministering to men in the outdoors. But before I jump into that list, I want to give you a little bit of a disclaimer. And that is that nothing that we do in the Reclaim model is absolutely tied to the outdoors or has to be done in an outdoor setting. There are many ways to connect and lead with men that don't involve the outdoors, and you can use the Reclaim model to do that. Adventures can look like wing nights, they can look like a poker night, they can look like taking guys to a baseball game. Countless ways to connect with guys and use this model in non-outdoorsy settings. There are many Reclaim leaders who are really connected to the outdoors, passionate outdoorsmen, guys that love to backpack, hunt, fish, ride dirt bikes, and they live in places where they have easy access to the outdoors. Even when that is the case, there's still many instances, week in and week out, where we use things that really don't have anything to do with the outdoors in order to connect with men using the strategies laid out in the Reclaim model. In fact, at best, it's probably 60-40. Yeah, I take a lot of guys out walleye fishing, I take a lot of guys shooting bows and arrows and backpacking, but it's almost just as likely that we're gonna end up at my house for a barbecue or we're gonna watch a game somewhere. So if you're not an outdoorsman, you're not an outdoorsy person, or maybe you live in a place like downtown Chicago where it's rare for you to be able to get guys out into the woods, don't feel like you're limited in using the Reclaim model to build relationships and minister to men. There are many opportunities to use this model to connect with guys and to lead them outside of the outdoor space. Let me just bring a point of clarity when it comes to this idea of the wild. When we're talking about helping a man navigate the wilderness of his own heart and to walk with the Father through that, that is a defining concept for us. It is crucial to who we are and what we do in Reclaim. When it comes to using the outdoors to build relationships with men and to lead them, that's something that we value deeply. We leverage it whenever we can, but it's a little bit secondary to our method and our message. So let's go ahead and jump into this bulleted list of practical advantages that we see in leading men in the outdoors. And the first one is this: when you can get a guy out into creation, you are taking him out of his comfort zone. It doesn't matter how much time a man has spent in the outdoors. When you can get him into the wild and into an untamed environment, his senses are peaked. When we're in the outdoors, we're in an environment that is always variable, it's out of our control, and we have to always remain aware of our surroundings. It's difficult to ever be completely comfortable. And because of that, something happens to the way that we process messages and work through problems. We see the world differently when our environment forces us to be in a state where we're alert and oriented and tuned into details. At the end of the day, spiritual truth is almost always conveyed in a way that's subtle. When we hear God's voice on the level of the heart, it's almost always a quiet voice. And so when you can get a man out of his comfort, away from what's familiar, and in a state where his senses are heightened, sometimes he can see and hear and receive spiritual truth in a way that he normally can't. The second reason that we love doing ministry in the outdoors is that when you can get out into creation, we are witnesses of God's power and his beauty and character. It's on full display in the outdoors. So not only does being in creation affirm within the heart of a man that there is a God, but it also reveals so much about God's character and his nature. And that goes well beyond just beauty. There's a brutal reality to the natural world, a harshness, a finality, a gritty, raw power that demands respect. And through it, a man can be introduced to a side of the Creator God that many don't understand, some fear, and some even hate out of a misguided, skewed perspective. At the end of the day, because God's character traits are so clearly on display in the wild, it provides an awesome backdrop for us to begin pushing in and helping men unpack who the Father is and what his heart is like. Thirdly, the wild provides a great context for us to lead men and to develop leaders. Now, I want to push into this concept a little bit more when we talk about adventures in the Reclaim model, but I want to at least touch on it now. And the idea is this, that when you engage in the traditional outdoor activities, things like hunting, fishing, trapping, rock climbing, backpacking, hiking, those activities are surrounded by lore and legend and do's and don'ts. And because of that, they create an opportunity for us to jump in and take the reins and lead men. For example, if you're going to take a guy backpacking for a weekend and it's his first time going, you have the opportunity to lead him every step of the way. God designed the outdoors so that there is a way that things work. When you get into camp, there's a right way and a wrong way to pick the spot where you're going to pitch your tent. There's a right way and a wrong way to build a fire. There's a right way and a wrong way to lace up your boots before you head up a steep grade. There's a right way and a wrong way to distribute the weight in your backpack. And so if we're active and intentional about jumping in and taking the reins, we get to show him at every turn. And what we're actually doing is beginning to define our relationship as mentor and mentee, or leader and follower. We're actually laying a foundation for discipleship. Here's the spiritual principle. If you can get a man to follow you in the things of the world, eventually you can probably get him to follow you in spiritual things as well. I'm going to say that again because it's important. If you can get a man to follow you in the things of this world, eventually you can probably get him to follow you in spiritual things as well. We are laying down a foundation for discipleship. So whether you're teaching somebody how to tie on a leader and cast a fly rod, or how to safely handle a firearm before all of you shoot trap, the outdoor space is full. There is a plethora of opportunities to lead men and to begin laying down this foundation where he's going to trust you with spiritual truth. We were made for creation, right? Not the system of the world that we find ourselves living in. The world pulls at our hearts, it burdens us, it tempts us, it distracts us. And when we can create some space between us and the systems of the world, there are a lot of spiritual truths that become more and more clear. This point is a little bit more philosophical than some of the points that we make, but it's important and it's powerful. And when you can take and kind of strip life of modern constructs and get back to a place that's raw and real and base and spend time in a context that's closer to what you were made for, all of a sudden it becomes more and more apparent that there is a creator and that I am a created being. You know, modern man lives in a world that is plastic. Everything is manufactured. Everything is artificial. The average person rarely engages in things that are real. It's like we eat fake food. We live in manufactured climates. We experience adventure by watching other people's adventures that are fake on television. The average guy would rather watch pornography than pursue a real woman. Our work continues to become less and less substantive. Our world is cubicles, it's Pergo, it's asphalt, it's Facebook, it's Starbucks. And when you can grab a guy and pull him out of that and get him into a context where you can replace his Facebook and his Starbucks and his cubicle with a river, a campfire, and a knife, all of a sudden life just makes more sense to him, right? When you can pull me out of the plastic and bring me to a place of real substance, it begins to make sense that I'm a created being. It makes sense that there's a creator, and the purpose of my life is more easily realized. We weren't made for screens. We're not made to watch television for hours on end. We're not made to slave our lives away in cubicles. We're made to be in relationship with the God of the universe, to steward his creation. So when we can bring a man into a context that's closer to what he was created for, something comes alive in him. There's something that's reawakened. And a man that's not encumbered by the systems of the world is so much more free to explore who he really is and who God is. This next idea, deconstructing worldly identity. The wilderness levels the playing field. When a man has been pushed to his limits in the wild, none of his worldly credentials matter. The wilderness does not give you credit for brand name, what your career might be, your race, what zip code you live in. These are the types of ideas that men in the world draw their identity from and find self-worth in. None of it matters when you're out in the wild. When you're in a group of guys and you're 5 miles from a trailhead, you get into camp exhausted and you're sitting around a campfire waiting for your food to warm up, it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, if you're black or white, what sports team you root for, or what kind of car you drive back home. When you're in a wilderness situation, if things go sideways, you're all gonna taste the same to a grizzly bear. It just doesn't matter. Men of the world might draw their identity and get worth from those ideas, but the wilderness doesn't care. It's completely unforgiving and totally unbiased. So because of that, in the context of the wild, a few things can happen. First, the facade begins to crumble. The pose that men have spent a life constructing and spend most of their lives hiding behind, it just doesn't work out here. And so walls can start to come down like that. It doesn't take long for a group of men to gel in the wild. Strong bonds can be made in short order when men don't have something to hide behind. Sometimes over a weekend in the wilderness, what we can do in terms of building relationships with men and among men can take a year or more to accomplish in a traditional small group setting. And this is a principle that's important not just for the group dynamics, but also for individuals, because reclaimed leaders can deconstruct false narratives that men believe about themselves and speak truth about their real identity. So getting men to a place where their pose just doesn't work, where the magic of their pose is kind of dispelled, is a great ministry tool when we're trying to help people understand who they really are. The last point that I want to make regarding why it is we leverage the wild and reclaim is this, that there's no better carrot. Strategically, there's no better carrot that we can dangle out there to get men to engage than offering untamed adventure in the outdoor space. By doing so, Reclaim speaks to the felt need that men have in our culture. We live in a world right now where masculinity is deeply undervalued, and the average man is starved for adventure, and he's starved to be fathered in masculine activities and crafts. The average guy also doesn't feel like he really has access to the outdoors. So oftentimes that invitation feels special, and it feels like a really great opportunity. He would love to learn how to shoot a shotgun. He would love to learn how to cast a fly rod. He would love to fill in the blank with whatever your outdoor activity is. I've always wanted to get into this, but I never knew where to start. It's something that we hear again and again from men in Reclaim. So next week, when you offer up that you and some buddies are going dirt biking and hey, you should come along with us, the answer will almost always be met with a resounding yes. I would love to go with you guys. I would love to connect and learn more about this. Giving access to real relationships and real adventures in the outdoors is one of the best things that you can offer up to men if you want them to connect with you and other like-minded men. So that concludes our list of reasons that we leverage the wild to connect with men. The list isn't exhaustive, but those are most of the key points. And of course, there's opportunities to create adventure and to apply some of these principles in non-outdoorsy settings. But being in creation certainly helps. It's why we try to leverage being in creation whenever we can. If you're able to, take advantage of it. So this concludes video number 3. And I'll see you soon in video number 4, where we're gonna talk about the team of men that runs a local Reclaim chapter. We're gonna look at the relationships that need to be there and why it is the dynamics that are in play on that team are so critical to Reclaim's strategy for connecting men to Jesus, to freedom, and to life.